Hi everyone, welcome to my personal finances podcast, episode 59. Can't believe it's already 59. And today we're going to talk about how to build wealth, like the top 1% with Mr. Jerry Fetta. He's a special guest all the way from Tampa, Florida, and I'm excited. He is the founder and CEO of DynamX, a financial firm that helps thousands of clients across the US build wealth. He is definitely passionate about making finances simple, true, and applicable, which is something that I totally believe in. That's why he's on the show. And without further ado, let's welcome him to the show.
Hey,
Hi,
Catherine, thanks so much
Jerry.
for having me on.
Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for coming. And so let's start off by having you briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, you gave me a great introduction already, but I've been working in finances for more than 10 years now. So helping families, individuals, entrepreneurs, with everything financial related. We like to tell people if it has a dollar sign in front of it, usually we can help. So we work with people on gaining financial literacy, getting rid of debt, building up savings, investing, taxes. There's a lot that goes into finances, and we kind of work with it all.
That's interesting. Well, so thanks for the introduction. But just so that's kind of briefly talk about what you talk about, what you do for a living. But let's start off by having you by five quick questions. That's more on the personal side for the audience to get to know you a little bit better. So nothing too serious, just quick question, and without much thinking, you can just answer. The first
Sure.
one will be, what motivates you in life and work?
So I think that for me, a big one is just kind of seeing what I'm capable of doing. I like to treat things like a game. So it's kind of like if it's a game, I want to see how well I can do. And that's a big part of it is anytime I'm like, whether it's working or building my business or working with clients, anytime I'm doing that, I'm looking at what's the best I'm capable of and what's the highest achievement I can get in that area.
Does that mean you always take things like a challenge? Doesn't matter what comes to you. You just want to see how well you would do.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of like more of a light thing, right? So like I said, it's kind of like a game. It's not something that's really serious for me. It's like, all right, cool, let's see what we can do, right? And it's kind of when I do that, I end up surprising myself.
Oh, that's interesting. That's definitely a good mindset. Yeah. All right. So the next question is, what is your personal definition of financial independence?
So mine is actually an equation. So it's passive income greater than savings, expenses, and taxes. And so when somebody has that, they no longer have the obligation of having to trade time for money anymore, and they can spend their life doing what they want to do at that point.
Hmm. All right. I like how yours is very structured, like in an equation. Yeah, because
Yeah.
for some people, it can be just come off as a feeling. I just feel like I'm financial independence, or yeah, they just feel like whenever they get the feeling of they can, spend anything they want to, instead of having a very clear equation. I think that it's good. So is that how you've been doing for your clients? Coming up with the calculations to be
Right.
exact.
Yeah. So that's very true. So that's one of the big milestones that we work with clients on is trying to help them get there. And once they do that, they have, like you said, the feeling of it, and then it also is like a mathematical reality for them too, where they can travel, they can start their businesses, they can spend time, volunteering, whatever it is they want to do with their time at that point.
Yeah. I think that's good. Yeah, I think it's so much so. It's so good to have the peace of mind and having the clarity that it's definitely something that I mean, for some of the clients have already achieved, and it's, I believe it should be very clearly stated in an Excel sheet or whatever formula that you have that you can see with your own eyes, right?
Right. Yeah. And that kind of is, with most goals, it's like that. If you have a good measurement and you've got a good way to keep track of it, it's much easier to stay on task and it's much easier to stay, focused. And if you do get distracted, you can come back to it pretty easily.
Yeah, that's great. All right. So next question will be, how do you yourself save and invest?
Ooh, good question. So I save in what I call stores of value. So I look at things that have been around for a really long time and they've got a good track record, and typically they're tangible, or they're at least backed by something tangible. So I save a lot of my cash. I'll convert it into actually like physical gold and silver. I also put quite a bit of my savings into life insurance, and I also like real estate. And then for investing, my big thing is anything I invest in, it's got to give me passive income. So I like doing, real estate. I like doing private lending, things that just give me those monthly income streams.
Hmm, interesting. Sounds like you have a whole like diversified portfolio there. That is the most important thing, right?
To a degree, yeah, I do have some diversification, but I don't like to invest in things I don't totally understand. So, like
Mm,
if I was to choose between like understanding something and being diversified, I'd rather understand something and not be diversified, because then at least I know I've got certainty, right, on what's going on, and there's not a lot of unpredictable things that can happen.
yeah, I love that point. Like it's crazy to jump into things that we are not really sure about. Just because someone is doing it, and yeah, someone popular is sharing about it. So it's
Yeah,
dangerous to try to just follow without further understanding, right?
totally.
Yeah, and I definitely believe that, building up the whole portfolio, it takes time. So there's no point in
Mm.
rushing step by step. But it's definitely good to explore ourselves into different kind of asset classes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you kind of hit it on the head. Is a lot of times the wealthy, they'll do it in phases where they'll start with like maybe one or two of their favorite things, and they'll invest in that, and then as they build more in assets, then they're like, it's kind of like my cup. The cup is already full. I need to get another one now. And so
Mhm.
that's then the next asset, and they just continue doing that until they've filled up each of those cups, and then they continue putting more cups in, and then they kind of diversify as a nature of doing that.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right. So the fourth question will be, what's your favorite quote?
My favorite quote. Man, I have so many of them. Though, so the one that came to mind, I posted today. It's actually from Warren Buffett, and he says that when the tide goes out, you can tell who's been swimming naked, and it's kind of like relating to the economy. Like when the economy happens, you can see who hasn't been wearing pants.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Oh. Yeah, surprising I didn't come across that, but that's a good point.
yeah,
Right. Yeah. I mean that goes to show like how well prepared are people um yeah, when it comes to, preparing for their finances, whether it's, preparing for any emergencies or any like different kind of situation, or they just dive right into it without anything, without pants on.
yeah, exactly. And there's very few things you can do rightfully without pants on. So most of the time, it's good to wear pants.
Very interesting point. All right, I wish I can type it out, but thanks for sharing that. All right.
You guys
So
can
the
tweet that if you'd like to.
yeah, 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 probably will. Right after this, it will be on my Instagram post. All right. So the fifth question is, it's meant to be fun. It's a question that we generate like out of like 20,000 combination. It's just for you to pick one out of two. So it's definitely random, and I can't show it to you, but I will read out to you. The question is, your next business startup will be most likely named Candy Crush or Frying Nemo.
Frying Nemo?
Yes,
I
Frying
think it
Nemo.
would be Frying Nemo. It's gonna be a sushi joint if it's Frying Nemo.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, we'll
Oh,
serve sushi.
Nemo, like that clownfish, like exactly, or not, or fish.
Yeah, I think because that's what you mean is like the fish from the cartoon, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So
Yeah, so
you'll
we
be
would just make it
frying
a
that
sushi.
Nemo. That's kind of
Yeah.
cruel. I was just teasing you. All right. Well, okay, but do you like sushi? Would that
I
be
like
someday?
sushi.
Would
Yeah,
that
I
be
like
someday
sushi.
your venture? Your business venture?
I could see myself maybe owning a sushi joint. Yeah.
Wow.
I would probably eat there more than I worked there, but it would be cool to own a sushi joint, you know? You can go in there and have sushi anytime you'd like.
Anytime, like three meals a day.
Yeah. That might be a bit much though.
Yes,
Maybe
sounds
like
like a
2
bit
meals a
too
day.
much.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot of carbs, and you will need to, you know, exercise a lot to burn those out. Right.
Exactly. You can run laps around it in between rounds of sushi.
Oh, interesting. Sounds like you already have a business plan. Something that no
Yeah,
one
we've got
else
it
is
figured
doing.
out.
Yeah, sounds like no one is doing that. You have a name, business name already. You already know what to do in there. The selling point, you get to work out and fry Nemo at the same time.
Yeah. I think the hardest part of that business though is gonna be the logo.
Yeah, but it's gonna be
'Cause like you
fun.
said, it can't be like a cruel
Oh
logo.
yeah.
We can't actually show Nemo being fried. It's gotta be something a little bit more.
Mm. Just come up with a picture with Nemo dancing happily on fire.
Yeah.
Something like that. All right. Thanks for that. Yeah. All right. No, at least now we know that you love sushi. Yep. And then, all right, that might be your next business, and we will keep an eye to that. All right. So
Awesome.
let's. Thanks for all that. Yeah. Now let's jump into what we're gonna talk about, which is how to build wealth, like the top 1%. Right. So, and like understand that you have a very clear defined like steps and structure, the step by step sequence to achieve the true financial freedom, which I believe you called it the blueprint to financial freedom, right?
Right,
So
exactly.
yeah, could
Yeah,
you please
and
share a
this was
bit about this?
yeah, this is actually a book that I have too. This is Blueprint to Financial Freedom. So we put it in a book format, but it's a 6-step process that people follow to build financial freedom.
Mhm. All right, that's interesting. Yeah. Now, yeah, it's good that you have a book. It's already selling worldwide.
Yeah, we published it. I published it actually in 2020. So I wrote it and published it in 2020, and we have a lot of clients that all over the country, and then in some cases in different countries across the world buying it too.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can share more of that. And yeah, so tell us like what are the steps, the blueprint to financial freedom.
For sure. So basically, like I've been working with clients on building wealth, like I said, for about a decade. And the thing that I would see is that most people just don't have the right information. And so it's hard to win with information that I don't have, right? So that's kind of the first thing is that, okay, well, what's the difference between somebody that gets into the top 1% and somebody that doesn't? And so I spent a lot of time actually studying these guys. I would read biographies of people like John Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie and JP Morgan. And one of the biggest common denominators that I saw was all of them learned about money at a very young age, right? Like
Mm,
JP Morgan, his dad was a banker. So when he was a teenage child, like he held over a million US or a million British pounds worth of gold. Like he actually saw that as a kid. He learned all about banking. Andrew Carnegie had a mentor in the in the business world that got him to start going to libraries and learning about business and finances. Rockefeller, he was actually an accountant when he was 15 or 16 years old, and he did that for many years before he started Standard Oil. So it comes down to that very beginning of, do I actually understand the truth about finances and the truth about money?
mhm,
And it's not an area, at least here in the US, we don't get taught very much about it. It's not something that in school, people really sit down with you and talk about. And what people often do get taught is more like marketing from Wall Street and investment firms who they want my money, but they're not really telling me the reality or the truth. They're just saying whatever they need to say to get me to invest with them.
mm,
So the very first part of the blueprint is based on, okay, well, we need to get people the right information. And so we call this phase 0, right? And when we've got the right information, we can now act on it. When we started doing this with clients, what we'd see is we teach people, okay, here's what the top 1% are doing, but people would do it in the wrong sequence. They would be like, it would be kind of like in Malaysia, do you guys have buffets? Like you go to a restaurant and it's like a buffet
yeah.
line and you can,
Uh-huh.
so
Definitely.
people would kind of treat it like that. They'd be like, well, here's all of my options and I'm going to pick these random things. And
Mhm,
if you send a child into a buffet, they're just going to load up on dessert. They're not going to get anything healthy or nutritious. Same thing with finances is if someone's never learned about money before, it's kind of like they're a child financially. And so if we say, here's the buffet, here's all the things the top 1% are doing, they go straight for the dessert. They go for all the exciting stuff and they ignore all of like the boring good stuff that they should be getting.
That's a
So
very
that's
good
where we're,
example.
yeah, thank you. And that's where we're like, okay, we need a blueprint. We need the right knowledge and we need to be
Mhm,
doing the right things, but we also need to be doing them at the right time and in the right sequence and with the right
mhm,
tools. And all of
mhm,
that equals like the completion of like, a blueprint, like building a house, right? There would be a definite way that I would build a house. And it's kind of uniform across the board. So that's kind of where we created it. The very first step is phase zero. And so phase zero is all about getting number one, financial education. And so
mhm,
that's spending a lot of time, especially the first few weeks, learning about finances and learning about what have the top 1% actually done. And then from there, the biggest part of that is, okay, well, how do I start using this? And so when someone learns this, we usually want to see that they're increasing their income. They're earning a lot more than they spend. They're starting to, in phase zero, handle like some of the financial past, like, paying off debt, getting solvent where they've got some savings. We're big on saving in stores of value like gold and silver rather than in currency. Every
mhm.
currency in existence has ever failed, and so it's one of those things that we don't want to keep money there. We want to transact with it, but we want to save elsewhere. So that really is phase zero. And so we on phase zero have the phrase for that. The goal is gaining financial freedom from the past in order to have the ability to create a financial future. And so when someone's done with phase zero, that's kind of what they've achieved.
Mm, all right. Yeah. I mean, that's important. And then I think you mentioned like the financial education is the most important at this stage, right? When someone who has like no knowledge in this this part, it's the most important. I think same goes to Malaysia as well and any other country. I think this thing is not taught not taught in school. Like no one are taught how to no one tell us that we need to manage our finances. We were just taught that we're supposed to go to school to get a degree or no get graduated and get a job, and that's it. And then everything else within it's just not talk about. So that's why most people like struggle when they they're actually out in the society, right?
Yeah,
All right,
and you
let's
hit it
bring
on the
us
head.
to the next. Mhm.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
was gonna say it's a little bit crazy that it's not talked about because it's one of those things that's like it's right up there with like eating and breathing and gravity. Like it's something like for 100% sure with certainty we're gonna have to interact with in our lives. And so it's
Mhm.
kind of like raising someone and not teaching them that they're supposed to feed themselves. And so I think that's one of the things that we're handling is, okay, well, we've got 18 or 20, or sometimes people come to me and they're in their 50s and they haven't learned this stuff. And it's like, not only do we have a bunch of catch up on learning it, but there's also maybe decades of wrong information and bad habits that we've got to
Yeah.
break through as well. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
a very big point for us. And the education, it's really big up front, but it's also throughout the entire blueprint. We're always continuing the education.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, I mean, the other very good point that you brought up is just because for someone who has just come across this, like you said, just encounter this at the late stage, of course, they can still learn and pick up, but there are a lot of things that need to change, or the mindset change, or the wrong habits, or the wrong beliefs. All these things takes a longer time to change. But I mean, I believe with patience and with, really like a true understanding of what's the goals they try to achieve, like everyone can do that as well,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's bring us to the next phase.
So
Assume
so
with this.
phase one.
Mhm.
Yeah, so phase one, I'm actually going page by page through the book here. So when somebody does phase one, the big thing that they're focusing on is savings. So, by the time they get through phase zero, all their debt's gone. They don't have any more consumer debt. They're budgeting, they're earning a lot, they're saving. So on phase one, when they reach that, the goal on phase one is we want them to have 6 months of living expenses. We want them to have that saved up. And then we also want them to be properly protected, right? So all of their liabilities are covered. They've got reserves, and the reason being is this is one of those things that can actually send someone backwards. So let's say that I don't
Mhm.
have savings, and this is something we'd see happen over and over. It just happened in the last week with the crypto market. If I invest all of my money into something that might lose, and I have no savings to fall back on, if it does lose, I'm all the way back in almost poverty. I've got nothing at that point. I'm broke again. So we want to protect and make sure that we never go backwards, and that's what we're handling on phase one. So the goal here is gaining present time financial solvency in order to have assets that exceed liabilities and the ability to pay all obligations. And that's kind of the end result that we want someone to have when they're finished with phase one.
I see. So basically, the first step is to get themselves educated and then solve all the debts and settle all the debts. And the second is to start saving in a proper way.
Yep, saving and then protecting against any risks or liabilities.
hmm Transferring the risk away and then start building up like the cash that they have and yeah, the wealth,
Yeah, you
right?
got it. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's go to phase two now.
All right, phase two. So phase two is one of my favorite phases. This is breaking out of the financial traps. And so like here in the US, and you guys might have like similar versions of this where you're at, there's a lot of like, I call them retail financial products, things that banks have put together and that Wall Street has put together. And it's not good for the consumer. Like it's something that people buy, but it's something that actually it makes a lot of money for the banks and for Wall Street and for our tax revenue agency, but it doesn't benefit the consumer very much. And most people are very convinced that they're supposed to do these things because they've been
Mm,
marketed to for years and years and years and years and years. So on phase two, we're breaking them out of all of this. We're helping them save in a way where they're not in the banking system. We're getting them out of Wall Street retirement plans. We're helping them. We call it becoming your own bank. We're helping them become the bank in their own lives, so that they don't have to keep going back to the actual bank and getting back into these financial products and services and getting involved again. So it kind of breaks them free, and now there's nothing holding them back. And at the end of phase two, like they're free from all that and they can just move forward with very like a great deal of speed.
that's a very important phase as well. I believe most people are kind of stuck here, especially those that have like pretty much like on the surface looks like they are handling it well. They have a stable job. They don't have any debts. They look like they have some sort of money to invest. That's when they are the targets. Sad to say, but they're the targets for all these kind of products. Yeah, that's the word that we call it here, like a products. And yeah, and then when like the biggest problem is when people start buying products, products that are not suitable for them, and they're just being marketed like that way that they believe that it's good for them, and that's when they will go back. It's like a reverse, back to phase phase zero, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, and
Right.
that's what we want to break them out of, is that, like with a lot of these products, they're building wealth for someone else. They're not building wealth for themselves. They're building wealth for the banks and for Wall Street and, for us over here in the US, for the IRS, right? So we want to get them out of that system where all the money that they used to give to the bank on their savings accounts and their mortgages and their car loans, instead they're keeping that. Instead of putting the money into their retirement plan and giving it to Wall Street every month, they're actually keeping that and building passive income. We have like tax planning and estate planning so that they can pay as little tax as they can possibly, legally, and protect their assets. And so once they've done all of that, they're in a position where wealth is possible because they are now their wealth building tool rather than being someone else's wealth building tool.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's very important to really understand like I think some of this like comes to the cost of like setting aside our money, right? If it's gonna cost you more and it's gonna end up having you pay more to the owner of the products, and it's definitely not a wise decision, right? You should be like using your wealth to build up more instead of like paying someone else and then set it aside where you don't even get to touch it, right? I guess that's the point.
Yeah. And that's a big one, is that like for especially for us, we're younger, right? So a lot of like, people my age, your age, and our generation, especially here in the US, like we've seen all of the things you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to go to school and go to college and get a career and do the retirement plan and get a home. Like all of that stuff doesn't work anymore. Like we watched like 2008 happen. Our parents lost half their retirement accounts. Right here in the US, it's insane for anybody in their 20s or 30s to afford a home. And so we were taught all of these should do's, and it's like, okay, well, is there a different way, and is there a better way? And that really is what phase 2 is all about, is showing people that better way.
Yeah, which is, I believe, like, it's telling people that it's time to change, and there are different ways, like, so compared to what we were taught or what we see our parents are doing. It's a bit different now, right?
Yeah,
I
for
think people
sure,
have
it
to
is.
come to realize that, right? So let's bring us to phase three.
Okay, phase 3 gets fun. This is where we start investing for passive income, right? So, think about if you've gotten through like phase 2 and you're in phase 3, you've got no debt, you're saving, you're earning a ton of income, you're saving as much as you possibly can. You're paying very little to nothing in taxes, you're not giving anything to banks, you're not giving anything to Wall Street. Bottom line is you're earning a lot and you're keeping most of it. And so this means that we have a lot of money now to start investing with. Now, the number one rule of investing is don't invest in anything you don't understand. And the second rule is don't lose money, right? And so those are two things we want to keep in mind, is if we're investing for passive income, number one, it needs to be easy for me to understand, and it needs to be something that there's no guarantees, but with certainty, good certainty, I know I'm not going to lose. There's very little downside, and I've got a lot of control. Now, passive income, the number one earner of passive income in the world are actually banks. If you think about all of these mortgages and car loans and credit cards, that's all passive income that they get every month. It's just interest that they earn, right? And
Hmm.
so we want to mimic that. So in phase 3, we're actually helping people become the actual bank by lending money on things like private mortgages and securing that by real estate. And so in that sense, we're getting, passive income. We don't have to do any property management. I'm not a landlord. I just get my interest every month like the bank does. But I'm also secured by a property. So in a worst case scenario, if there's, a recession or a missed payment or something like that happens, there is like a real asset behind it, versus, if I were to do like stocks or crypto or something different, where it's like, okay, well, what's really keeping my money safe? Where is it actually, if the market drops out, do I get something back? Right. So this kind of gives you that downside protection. And so the goal here on phase 3 is you want to do as much of these deals as possible. And you want to do them until you're able to save 40% of your pre-tax income. And that's a big number, but that's actually statistically, when you look back, that's actually what the top 1% of wealth actually do save, is they average about 40. And they've been doing that over the last 100 years. So we want to copy that same stat and do that same behavior. And the investments help us get enough income where we actually can.
Hmm. Oh, I think this is a very, very important phase as well, which is like what people tend to jump into, right? I believe, like,
Yeah.
do you have some story about like your clients where, whenever they come to you, I believe pretty sure like you will start with some preliminary like questions, and all they do is jump right into it and tell you, I want to invest. Do you get
Yeah.
questions like that?
That's almost always how it goes. Like when my team talks to people initially, that's like the first thing is they're like, their focus is, okay, well, when can I start investing, and how do I get passive income? Right. And that's kind of like I said with the buffet, that's like the dessert, like that's the fun stuff. But it's like, hey, you need to eat your protein first. You need to get actually like good things in with your finances before we get there. So there's a lot of, like, when we work with clients, there's a lot of excitement on phase 3, and it can take a while to get there. But when you do it the right way, you're not ever putting yourself at risk, and you're never going to go backwards. Right. I was talking to a guy today, and he became a client recently, but he prematurely got into the crypto market, and he lost $500,000 last week. And so that's like, that's, when you think about it, that's a lot of money to lose. And that's a lot of money to have to now go get back and build it back up on savings and all that. It's kind of a big loss. So doing it this way, like, that really isn't going to happen. You'll have your downside protected, and there's nothing that's ever going to pull you backwards. And then you can just continue building that passive income and keeping the majority of it.
Yeah. So, like, do you have more examples of like what will happen if people jump right into this and before getting the phase zero to
Before.
two?
Yeah. So here's a good one that people don't think about, is that, because everything is done either by, like you said, like some famous person's like, hey, you should do this, and we see it on Instagram or TikTok, and we're like, oh, that's a great idea, but we don't have any firsthand experience. right? So like on phase 3, when I'm doing a private lending deal, the minimum that I need for that is usually about 50,000 US dollars. And so, and that's not like a ton of money, but it's also not a small amount. Like it's a lot to save up and get to. So when somebody does that and they're like, okay, I'm going to put 50,000 in, the first thing that they realize is that I don't have that 50,000 anymore. That's invested, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
can't use that for an emergency. I can't use that for a car. I can't use that for down payment. It's in this real estate deal now. And so that's an instance of like, people don't always think that through until it's time to invest. And then the reality hits them of, oh, you mean this 50,000 I'm going to give to the investment, and that's going to be, it's going to be invested for the long term, and I'm not going to have that back for other things. So that's the first instance. The other one is like on that example, if I invest, $50,000, usually I'm going to make about 12% on a private lending deal, which as a rate of return is good. 12% is great, especially if it's very minimal risk and it's secured by real estate. But if we do the math on that, 12% of 50,000 means I'm going to make $500 a month. And so people think, because they did their first investment that they're wealthy. Well, they realize I'm not wealthy on $500 a month. I need like 20 of those. I need to do that 20 more times before I've got enough passive income where I'm actually wealthy. And so that's something that, again, like you don't always realize that if you don't have the education. You just hear online like passive income and invest, and you're like, okay, well, I just need to do that. And then you get in and you're like, okay, I need to do that 20 more times before it really makes a dent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that these are two very good explanation to why do we need to like have all the phase zero to two really really ready and like really in place before we get into this, because so many people just think that, oh yeah, I mean, I hear you very often as well. I mean, being a licensed financial planner, people come to me and say like, I want to invest, I want passive income, but you need something, there are many steps before this, before we can get into this. And of course it's gonna sound fun for people who are already doing this, and people tend to like, I want that as well, but without realizing that there are so many things that have to be done like before this. You need to make sure that once your money, like, you need to build up that capital before you
Yeah.
can start doing this, right?
Yeah, and I think another big one that I see happen too is with debt. Like people don't like paying off debt. Like it's kind of like one of those things where like, okay, if I have to, I'll do it. So if they have 50 grand, they're more prone to want to invest that, even if they could pay off debt with it, right? And so what people don't realize, like with debt, for example, is if I've got $50,000 in debt, let's say in credit cards, for example, which would be a lot of credit card debt, but people have that. My interest rate on that is probably like 15 to 18%. And my minimum payment is probably 2% of the balance, which means it's costing me $1,000 a month in maintaining that minimum payment. So if I take my 50 grand and instead invest that, I'm only earning 12 and it's not guaranteed, and it's only paying me $500 a month. If I take the same 50,000 and I pay off the debt, it's saving me 18% in interest, which is like earning it by not having to pay it, which is guaranteed. And I'm getting $1,000 a month back instead of 500. And so while it might not be the sexy option, it is the financially smarter decision to use that to pay off the debt and to, forego the investing until later, even though it sounds more exciting to do it now.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just, I mean, it's just, it sounds like just mathematics, just comparing the interest that we'll be getting, like, how much would it cost you and how much you would get in return. And doing that, most people should be able to make the decision easily, but most of the time people tend to jump, like skip all
They're
this,
emotional.
forget about all this, as if
Yeah,
something that it's, yeah, and then just go straight into what is fun and interesting to them, and they will pay the cost later on, right? So
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, so that's a very fun and like interesting phase. So let's bring us to phase four.
So phase 4 actually gets even more fun and interesting. So in phase 4, this is called a this is called a sophisticated investor. So in the US, we have something called an accredited investor, which happens later. That's actually on phase 6. But prior to that is phase 4, which is sophisticated. This is when somebody has achieved a $250,000 net worth, not including the value of their house. They're saving 40% of their income, and they've done they've done enough of these private lending deals where they are actually by definition sophisticated. They know how they work. They've got a good understanding of it. And so when someone gets into phase four, there's a couple main things that we get into. The first one is with all these private lending deals, they've now got interest income from an investment activity, and that can actually be turned into its own corporation or trust. So you could actually set up a trust or a corporation, not only to protect those assets, but also to shelter that income. And then that income, now it builds an income stream for that entity, and they can get corporate credit. So they can actually start getting like non-recourse loans and doing things like real estate investing, and other things on a very high level that they usually wouldn't be able to do as an individual. So that's something that they kind of unlock on phase four. The other thing too is there's other investments they can get into at that point. Once they've done enough with the private lending, they can do more advanced investments that there are greater returns, but there's also potentially greater risk, which means there's a greater level of understanding and responsibility that an investor has to have. And so they've kind of proved that by then. I've done enough of these. I've got a track record. I can figure this out. And that way they're not going into it as a brand new investor, with their hopes high, but their education low. And then finally, on phase four, they can also start doing some tax reduction trusts. So there's a couple of different ways they can set up charitable entities and charitable trusts to massively reduce their taxes. And so that's something they'll do on phase four. And usually by this point, these are a little, as you can understand already, they're a little bit more complex and sophisticated, which is why we call it a sophisticated investor. This usually might also be where they're going to hire like a bookkeeper or an administrative assistant to help them start managing some of these new structures and ventures. That way they're not, spending their entire week, handling all this stuff. They're able to still live life and enjoy, the time that they're buying back.
Yeah, I guess most people at this stage, like, is where they maybe still like not very busy with what they want to do, or busy with the work and the business they're in. So yeah, that's when they have to start, like, dedicating all these important things to bookkeepers, and yeah, and the tax expertise, right?
Exactly. It's kind of like building your own little team at that point.
Yeah, that's important. So what about phase 5?
So phase five is becoming an accredited investor. So here in the U.S., there's a couple different definitions of accredited investor. The one that we go by is that your net worth exceeds $1 million, and that excludes the value of your primary residence. In the United States, the way that the investment laws work is when someone's an accredited investor, there's something called a non-registered security, or also a private placement investment. Anyone below accredited is not allowed to invest in them, and they're not even allowed to be advertised to about these types of investments. So the average person has no idea that this exists as an option. And so when someone becomes accredited, it's like the curtain gets pulled back, and there's all of these private investments that they're allowed to now start doing that they would never have known about otherwise. And so that's kind of what we do here, is we get them to that point so that they can actually qualify to do these investments. And at the $1 million net worth level, like, what's great about this is it's not like they're doing this as their first investment. They've already got dozens of investments. They've got reserves. They've got credit built up. They've got this whole foundation. So now they can go do these more advanced investments, and they don't have to worry about the risks associated compared to if they were doing it as a brand new investor.
Yeah, I think at this stage, I think it's important to note that, yeah, for those that are already in this stage, open your eyes to, open, like, get as much opportunities like this, so to to accrue, to create our wealth, to further accumulate our wealth, not accumulate, but building the wealth, right? Like, more like the multiplier, right? But at the
Yeah.
same time, I believe like this is the most important stage. I mean, important note for the others who are still in, like, phase 0 to 2, that beware of this. If someone is telling you that, I have this private investment, when you are and not not at phase 5 yet, chances are you know what they are, which
Yeah.
I come across, like, cases like this, like, that people share about, oh, this private mandate, private investments, guarantee your returns. I think the
Yeah.
the key word is the guarantee. Whenever you come across, like, the word guarantee they're trying to market, and then they tell you, how many percent you will be getting back. I think that is a very big red alert, right?
Yeah, and that's the it kind of almost goes a little bit back to phase 3 of like when people try and skip ahead. Sometimes when
Mm-hmm.
they try and skip ahead, what you just described is what they end up getting involved in because they're so eager to invest that they overlook all these red flags and they don't know what questions to ask, right? So like for me, I'm an accredited investor and so I might get 100 deals that people present to me and I might only do 3 of them, right? Because the other 97 are either they didn't file with the SEC or they don't have their private placement memorandums or they don't have a business plan or they can't show me a profit and loss that's been audited by a CPA, like little things that you should know to look for, but the average investor just doesn't know. And that's why we save this for phase 5 is because at that point, someone has enough time to actually like invest in learning this stuff because they've got that foundation and they've also got enough built up where they know what it's like to make money. And I think that when I have a lot of money, I'm more cautious, right? When I'm only investing $1,000, I'm not as cautious because it's like, okay, it's only $1,000. If I lose it, no big deal. When it's, half a million or 100,000 or a million, I remember all of the work that it went into like getting there and building that up. So I'm going to be a lot more cautious and do a lot more due diligence at this stage because I'm swinging with such a big number.
Yeah. But I think like this phase 5 is definitely interesting. It looks like a phase where everyone wants to get into, but it's just have to be careful that yeah, this is an interesting and fun phase, but you need to go through the phase 0 to 2 to 3 and 4 without skipping any of this. And when all of those phases are done, then phase 5 will just be waiting for you, like welcoming you. And yeah, right.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
what's next?
So that's next is phase 6. So phase 6 is where someone actually achieves financial independence. So their passive income exceeds their savings, expenses, and taxes. And it's a culmination of all the prior phases. They do all this work and the end result is they now no longer have to trade their time for money. And what's fun is like at phase 6 you have freedom to do whatever you want to do. Like if you want to keep going and you're like, hey, I want to get from a million net worth to 10 million or 50 million, you're welcome to do that. If you're like, hey, I want to go travel the world and spend time with my family, you're welcome to do that. And that's the entire point, is there's no restriction on your time anymore. There's nobody saying, hey, you've got to go to work on Monday or you've got to do anything. Really, you've got the freedom to do what you really want to do.
Right. Well, I guess like this is a stage where we talk about like financial freedom now, of course, beyond that as well, right?
Yeah, and I think for me, when I go beyond financial freedom, I think there's a certain line where it's like, okay, I've got enough for me, right? And everyone's got that number where that's like enough for them, and they could never spend that the rest of their life, even if they tried to. So the question then becomes, well, what's next? What do I do after that? And I think that really it becomes contribution. Andrew Carnegie, he has this book called The Gospel of Wealth. And so what's so inspiring about his story is at one point he was the richest man in the United States. And he actually died with less than $100,000 to his name because he gave all of the rest of it away. And he just went through these philanthropic endeavors of gifting money for hospitals and libraries and universities and just contributing back to society. And I think that's what's next for someone, is if they're on phase 6 and they're like, okay, what's my purpose, what's the next goal? And I would say the goal is go help. You've got the means to go help, and you can help by teaching other people to do what you did, or you can help by taking your resources now and solving real problems and contributing to the world around you.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess like as that is that a point that people are really like looking for the purpose of life, because they can like, and they definitely stop looking for the wealth that most people are actually still chasing. At least that works still like a motivation for life. They know they need to make money, and to
Yeah.
that point, that's done. Then what's next, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of the old adage, you probably know this being a financial planner, is when people retire and they don't have a purpose, statistically they actually die sooner. They get early onset Alzheimer's and dementia and these different things because they don't have, they used to have a job, they used to have a reason to get up every day. And so they retire or they're financially independent, and that's great. But if you don't replace that with a different reason to get up, like you said, it's kind of like, okay, well, why? What's next? What do I do at this point? And so I think that's where someone, they probably learn this as they go. They start to figure out what matters to them and what their purpose would be. And so by the time they get to phase 6, our hope for them is that they're going to do more than just vacation every day. They're going to do, a business, or they're going to help with a charity, or they're going to volunteer with their church, or whatever it might be. And they can do that at a very high capacity because they have the ability with their time.
Yeah, I think it's important to not even just think about that. Sometimes it might be a little bit, like takes a lot of work to figure it out at phase 6, because this thought has not come to them like earlier. But if for someone who actually just know that if they have the money, they would want to help, help people with this, help people with that. That really works as a, motivation for someone to make more and more money and then achieving their goal even faster, I think.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. And I think that that's a really healthy motivator for trying to build wealth, is that, like,
Yeah.
then there's nothing wrong with spending it and like using it for like material stuff, but there's only so much of that someone can do, right? And so then it's like, okay, well, if I've got all this money and nowhere for it to go, then I get bored. And that's usually when people start doing bad things or stupid things with their money, is because they're bored and they've got all this money. So I think it solves that issue too, of like, kind of the cliche, like, the wealthy family with the rich heirs that they don't ever work and they're always on the news with, drugs and different things. I think that's because they don't have a purpose, right? And so that purpose should be there by then, and that kind of keeps that from happening.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you so much, Jerry, for sharing the whole, like, from phase 0 to 6, where you actually brought me through the whole book. Which, how long did you take to write up, to come up with the book?
So the book, I actually wrote it and published it in less than 2 weeks. I just, it was just something that was in my head. Like it was, I just sat down and started typing, and 2 weeks later it was done. So it was
Wow.
one of those inspirational things.
Wow. Did you get any sleep in the 2 weeks?
I did actually. I still got plenty of sleep. I like sleep, so yeah, I made sure I got my 8 hours in too.
Oh, that's impressive and interesting. Well, thank you for like bringing us like through the whole book. But I'm pretty sure like there are a lot of details that we didn't really get the chance to get into. So yeah, for everyone who's listening, like just get your hands on the book, and then and to further understand on what we're talking about in this like this 0 to 6 phases, right? So there's a lot of like information that's really really helpful for someone's in the journey. But if you were to have like a top 3 tips in the wealth building journey, what would they be?
Yeah, so if I was to summarize with top 3 tips, I would say number one, build wealth like a bank, right? And what I mean by that is, if you observe what banks are doing, if you can try and mimic that in your own life, then that's gonna give you a leg up. You can be successful by kind of copying their successful traits. The second one is achieve financial independence, which is, passive income greater than savings, expenses, and taxes. And again, that's that phase 6 that we talked about. And then thirdly, and this one is kind of like the linchpin, it's the glue that sticks it all together. Save 40% of your gross income and save that in real stores of value. And that's going to allow you to actually have the means to do the investing to get passive income.
Hmm. All right. Thanks for these 3 tips. I'm pretty sure like it took years of your experience, and also cases that you're seeing, references, and things that you read about to come up with these top 3 tips, right?
Absolutely. I wish that I had these when I was 18. I could just, shortcut. I learned them later, but I wish I had them sooner.
Really, all these 3 tips. Now, which one would be the one that you think you really, not to say regretted, but kind of wish that you didn't, I mean, focus more on this? Like, which one would that be?
I would say number 3. I think if when I was 18 years old, if I could have understood saving 40% of my income, I think that
Mm,
would have been a game changer, just because of the compounding nature of that, right? I'm turning 30 this weekend, so that's going to be 12 years of, me putting away 40% of everything I brought in. Even if I never invested it and I just left it in a bank, which I wouldn't do, but let's say I did, that's a lot, right? And that would be a big advantage to have.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, yeah, I mean, same thing. Like whatever I'm like talking to my clients right now, things I'm trying to like suggestions that I'm giving them. Every time like I come across this, I think like how I wish like someone like this, my Catherine at this age, telling me, Catherine at age, maybe I could be greedier, maybe age 16. And
Yeah.
if I could have started that earlier, like things would be slightly easier. But I believe that's the whole journey, and it's just because we learn from mistakes, we learn from things that we did or did not do, and that's why we can tell this to the people that we care, right?
Yeah, and I think that there's an element too of like you said, learning from it now. Like there's a little bit more urgency, I would say. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
still, relatively, I'm still young to have the info that I have, right? At least I'm
Mm-hmm.
not learning it when I'm 40 or when I'm 50. But when I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, this probably clicked for me when I was like 25, right? And that's when I was like, okay, I should start doing 40%. So, if I would have learned that when I was 18 instead, I don't know if it would be as urgent because I would probably feel more comfortable. I would probably, because I have those extra years that I had been doing it. So, me knowing it now, like I think that there's a little bit more urgency behind the importance of it. And that helps me because I have that much more purpose and meaning behind it. But it also gives me a lot of motivation to share it with others more so than maybe I would have if I had done it at 18 or 16. And it's like, okay, well, I did it, but it's not as important because I kind of take it for granted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, well, I guess this is something that, it's hard, easier said than done. We still see many people like taking things for granted. And, maybe some part of us have done that, at certain age. We've gone through that journey. Sometimes it's not easy for you to just, get people out of that stage. People just have to go through and they'll learn it, and it comes at different age, different situation, but just people will get there, right? But the
Yeah,
more
everyone kind of
open
has their own timing.
yeah, yeah. And then like also when you even though someone is stuck in a different like situation, as long as they're opening their mind to listening to different things, and they will get there.
Yeah, and that's like for me, like those are the big three things that I look at. Like when I look at like can someone improve financially and can I help them is like number one, are they willing? And if they're
Mm-hmm.
willing and like you said, open-minded to it, if they're open to it, that's to me, that's the first thing they need. And the second one is, are they able to do it? And as long as they're able to do it, do they have an income or do they have a way to work and get income? And can they figure out, the math of things? It really comes down to like you said before, it's knowing the math and also knowing the vocabulary. So if I can use a calculator and a dictionary, I can learn anything I need to know about finances. And then, for me, the final one is, are they an ethical person? Are they going to do good things if I help them? I don't want to help, someone become financially independent and then them turn out to be a terrible person and harm everyone with their wealth. Right. So those are like
Yeah,
my three things. Are you willing? Are you able? And are you ethical? And if you are, I think that this is for anybody that wants to do it.
yeah, that's a very good point. Right. So thank you again, like for sharing all these things with us. I feel like I read a whole textbook and a summary of a whole multiple textbooks, and also summary of your life, maybe your own like life stories as well. Thank you, really, for that. So
Absolutely.
if
My
there is
pleasure.
yeah. So if there's, we talk about so many things. We talk about, the steps that people, for whoever, like in whichever phases, it's important to learn that there are this like, 0 to 6 phases. And then, like knowing that we can progress from steps to different steps, right? And then you also shared about the top 3 tips for people, for anyone who is building their wealth and in that journey. So if there's one last thing, there's one quick thing that you would tell all the audience to, just take action and start doing it right now, what would that be?
Thing called the Big Three Challenge. It's three activities you should do every day, and each of these only take 10 minutes. So every day, spend 10 minutes doing something to learn about money. Every day, spend 10 minutes doing something to earn extra income. And then every day spend 10 minutes looking at where your money went. Where did I spend it? Where did I save it? And if you do that every day, and I think if you do that for probably 90 days, it becomes a habit. And that's a habit that's going to pay off forever.
Oh, that's a good one. All right, that's only like add up to like a 30 minutes in a day, right?
30 minutes. Everyone has 30 minutes.
Yeah, and so 10 minutes of like a reading about
Yeah,
how
10
to
minutes
make
of
money.
learning on money,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and
And
then
then
10 minutes
yeah,
of doing something to earn extra income. So it's not earning income because that's like your job already, but it's like spend 10 minutes figuring out how could I get more income.
more income. Okay. Learning about basically finances, like money, that's the first one. And second
Yeah,
is like figure out ways to get extra income, right? Whether that's
right. 10
investing
minutes.
or whether that's doing something extra that's out of our job. And then the last thing is to basically that is sit down, maybe not a too not a very fun job at first, but basically sit down and to look at where our money goes, in and out, how does our cash flow look like, how do we spend our money, something about understanding how we are doing with our money at the moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, that one's not a fun job, but it's kind of like the reason it's not a fun job is because people don't do it frequently. So it builds
Mhm.
up and it becomes this giant chore. It's kind of like if I never wash my dishes and I get a pile on the counter, I'm like, I don't want to go do this is a giant pile. I have no interest in that. But if it's like every time it's dirty, I go clean it, then it's never a pile. And so that 10 minutes a day
Yeah.
keeps it nice and short and you're always keeping it caught up. And then it's easy to do every time.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing to talk about. Is because like managing our finances, like if one thing, if you're lost, you have no direction, it can be tough and it can be boring, it can be confusing as well. But if it's something that you've been doing for a long time, because you will go from stage like okay, I'm just looking at my cash flow, how much I save, or maybe just 10 $10 a day, and from this to okay, and then like understand where my money goes to, then not still not so fun. Like you learn about how much you spend your money on something that you don't even care about, and then trying to fine tune from there, and then slowly it will progress to like oh, how much more money I'm making while doing this, and then every day I'm making this much, and then it piles up to a certain amount that you see it grow from $1 to yeah X amount, and that will be more fun at that point. And
Yeah,
at that
you have
point,
to let the snowball build.
exactly. And at that point is when you feel like it's no longer a boring job. It's fun. It's motivating, and you want like yeah, you feel more accomplishment, and yeah, that's when you will really get the hang of all of this, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I think yeah, thank you for all this thing that you shared with me. And then yeah, I think for everyone who's listening, like you learn so much from you. And I think no, so how do we, learn more from you? Maybe there's a time for you to share about how can people reach you and to, learn more about things that you help your clients.
Yeah. So you can follow me on social media. So you can follow me on, I'm probably the most active on Instagram and on TikTok. So
Mm.
you can just find me Jerry Fetta, just my first name and last name on both of those platforms. If you go to my company website, I actually have a free download, a free chapter download of the book here.
Mm.
Let me make sure I've
Mm.
got the right link for you here. And this will actually be a great place to start as far as getting more information. So it's going to be jerryfetta.com/free chapter. And so if you
Mm.
go there, you can actually get a free chapter of the book here. And that's a easy way to start, learning and, applying what we talked about today and getting a little bit more, you'll get more detail with the chapter than we went over just today, but, kind of getting into the nitty gritty.
So would that be the chapter zero? I mean chapter one of like the phase zero.
Yep, exactly. So it's the very first chapter and it'll get you started. It'll get you the info you need to get on that first step.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I think everyone should just download that and then just start reading. Like which what we talk about in the phase one is the most important. It does not sound as sexy as as you want it to be, but actually, everyone started from there. I think that's an important thing to
Yeah.
learn, right? Anyone,
Yeah.
whoever you look up to.
And it's one of those things too where the people that really are financially successful, they
Hmm.
never stop doing that phase. They always are still learning, right? So that's a little bit like you said earlier. It's like one of those more boring ones at first, but when you start winning, then you realize how important it is, and you're like, okay, I always still need to be learning, even if I'm at phase 6.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, so just don't, I mean, for whoever's listening, no, don't get a misconception that only those who don't know, like, they have to learn about all these things. Just because the more we know, the more we want to learn. And it's a never, it's a non-stop and it's a never-ending process. And yeah, I think,
Exactly.
it's the day when we stop learning. It's the day when we, yeah, no longer living, right?
Yeah, my dad has a quote. He says, if you're gonna be dumb, you better be tough. So if you don't learn, life is going to be hard for you, and that you better be very thick-skinned.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so thanks again for all these things that you shared with us. Thank you so much for coming on the show and to share all these things. Sharing so much about the book that you wrote. Took some time to wrote and to have written. And yeah, thank you so much for that. Is there anything that you'd like to share with our audience?
I think that the podcast was great. Be sure that you review it, you share Catherine's podcast at wherever you can, and put this on your social media if you watch it.
All right. Yeah, I mean that's important. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Sometimes I tend to forget as well. I think sometimes when we come across things that we find interesting, chances are that thing can help others as well. That's why we share, right? And that's why I find things that you are sharing might be helpful to my audience. That's why I get you on the show, so to talk about all this, to share with others while learning as well, right? I
Yep.
think that's
And if
the
you ever
whole
see a
objective
sushi
of
place
this.
called Frying Nemo, you know whose business it is.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I can't wait for that. I don't mind to fly to Tampa just to try that out, or anywhere, anywhere you would have the first outlet.
Exactly.
All right, thank you, Jerry.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Hi, thanks again for watching. I hope you learned so much from Jerry and like for this sharing. Do look out for his book, and then I'll share this on our link on mypf.my/podcat, and I'll see you in the next episode.